Segment 3, Gold and Black Live. We are actually recording this at after we just got done with Orlando White. We're still down at Bruno's. Now, I changed my background, but we got sponsor Trent Johnson here. Trent is myagent.com, one of the sponsors of the show. Triple X, also on the Hill, but on the level of Purdue tradition since 1929. Both places Tim Spiker has been in his life. Tim joins us for segment 3. Tim's been a friend of the show, had him on last year. A leadership, I call you a leadership guru. I don't know if that's the fair thing, but it really has an interesting book that I've enjoyed that I think I can show here.
Thank you.
The Only Leaders Worth Following. Tim Spiker wrote it in 2020. Really a manual of talking about leadership and all the things you bring. But give us the elevator speech of what you. We know you spent 2 years. It was 2 years at Purdue as a walk-on, and then transferred, but played with Matt Painter. And had the opportunity to go into this field. Give us a little bit of background for our viewers on that.
Yeah, probably about 7 or 8 years after college, this just passion for the issue of leadership kicked on in me, and I just started researching and doing everything I could do to learn as much about the topic. And thankfully, I had been around some pretty great leaders. And, you know, sometimes you realize things in the moment, but oftentimes it's only in hindsight. You're like, oh, wow, that was really exceptional. And I've had the chance to kind of look back on my life and see so many great leaders. And of course, Gene Keady falls into that list really profoundly. So I've just moved forward in working with organizations around the topic of leadership. It's never far from my mind and my heart. And so that's what I spend my time on when I'm not trying to catch Purdue basketball, and also trying to hang in there with 4 kids of my own. So that's what I'm up to.
Yeah, and that is a full plate and then some. You matriculated to West Lafayette from Morgantown, West Virginia, correct?
Well, I actually had to stop at Brewster Academy. So I actually played against Zoe at New Hampton Prep. We were both up there. Now Brewster was competitive then. You know, it's at a different level now. But I probably couldn't make the team at Brewster now. But yeah, no, I spent a prep year before coming over to Purdue.
And your dad obviously was also involved in the staff here as well, and a big part of what Purdue basketball and Purdue athletics is all about. All right, leadership. We talked about Gene Keady was back last weekend for the Indiana game. Let's talk about those leadership lessons that were brought to you that came to the fore that are still resonating with you all these years later from what Gene brought.
There are so many things that pop up. It's amazing, really. And you just don't realize it's happening at the time. One of the things is, like, how do you have an even keel as a leader? Which isn't to say that you aren't passionate. Nobody would ever accuse Gene Keady of not being passionate. Yeah. But one of the things that Coach would say to us is you're never as good or as bad as you think you are. And I remember a few years ago, I had a big business deal that unexpectedly fell through. And we were counting on it. We had planned a lot for it. And I remember sitting in my car in the parking lot at the age of 48.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing Gene Keady in my head. I'm hearing Gene Keady say, you're never as good or as bad as you think you are. In this case, you're not as bad as you think you are.
Yeah.
This didn't work out. But if you were to go back and look at the game tape, you know, theoretically, of how this deal went down and didn't happen, you would probably find you didn't screw it up quite as badly as you thought. You didn't get the opportunity, but maybe there were some other circumstances. And it goes the other way as well. You get a great opportunity with a client in my space. You start and like, well, there may be some circumstances that helped you out. So little things like you're never as good or as bad as you think you are. And then I would add into that, you know, we had an emphasis of the day every day in practice.
Yes.
And once in a while it was about basketball. Yeah. Most of the time it was about life. And so when you look at a person like Coach Keady and you see what he's up to as a leader, you know, the equivalent in the business world is you're only interested in the P&L. You're only interested in the profit loss. You're not interested in the people. In the sports world, you're only interested in wins and losses. You're not really interested in your players as people. And Gene Keady was the opposite of that, which is why we all wanted to run through a wall for the guy, because we knew that he cared about us more than just as basketball players. So those are a couple things that come to mind when I think about Coach Keady.
Well, I love that whole idea of the emphasis of the day. And I was a student manager long before you played, and we'd get the chalkboard out and he'd write it down. And you did kind of wonder, because Gene was always, he was a football guy, but a rough and tumble guy, and it was all about intensity. But to bring that to the table, I think was always very, very telling about the kind of guy he was and what it meant to him to be around young people and to try to lead them. All right, Matt Painter has got is cut out of the same cloth in a lot of ways, different personality certainly,
Sure.
but no one,
Sure.
there is no personality quite like Gene Katie, I don't think, but they broke the mold.
True.
But Matt has had leadership challenges throughout his time, extremely successful tenure in West Lafayette. An interesting one this year, because obviously the last 3 years tournament hasn't always gone the way that Matt and company would like to have it go. As you watched this team now 23-2 after a harrowing win last night against Minnesota. But just talk about what you observe from what you see from Matt Painter and how he has dealt with it this season and moving his team forward.
Well, you see a few different things. I think the biggest thing is the culture of the program. We can talk about X and O things to do with this team versus that team. But when you look at talented athletes who are bought in to the idea of not only the team, but Purdue, there is something very special going on when you can find people who know how to play, are coachable, and are more committed to the group than to themselves, especially in this day and age. I mean, thank goodness there wasn't social media when I was in college. Like, goodness gracious. Like, I can't even imagine how that would have been. But this world invites high level athletes to be all about themselves. And if you just look back through this program and how it has evolved under Matt's leadership, I don't think you end up with a culture like this by accident. One of the things we talk with our clients about as a leadership responsibility is driving culture. That's not something that happens, you don't just hope for it, you plan for it, you work on it. And I just think there are so many things to be excited about. But ultimately, I think one of the main ones is the culture that Matt and the staff, Brandon, Elliot, others, I know I'm not naming everybody here, but some of the folks I get a chance to interact with come to mind or did interact with many years ago. I just think there's a very, very special program development reality going on at Purdue that is very rare.
One of the things that's been interesting about Matt Painter, of course, one of the top coaches in college basketball, and his ability to delegate. There's been much written about PJ Thompson running the offense and getting in the huddle at a key point of the game, and Matt listening to him. There was a viral video on that, to Sasha Stefanovic handling out of bounds plays. But the ability for a leader to give up some of the reins and let others do it, that's a big part of what this is all about.
Yeah, I mean, you have to not let your ego get in the way. And you have to also Matt's job is not only to be for players, but to be for his assistant coaches. And so creating opportunities. Now he's doing this thing that is pretty new here in college basketball, this level of specialization. That is a new thing. And here's the thing that would be really, really hard as a leader. And that is, how do you let go of things that you're really good at? Because I'm here to tell you right now, 28 years ago, it was very obvious that Matt Painter knew X's and O's. I mean, I oftentimes will share a story where I won't get into all the details, but let's just say there was a game at a critical point where Matt Painter interrupted Gene Katie in the huddle to tell him that we needed to run a different play. And we ran a different play because of that. Now, that can't happen every day. There's a hierarchy and there's some, but it did happen the one time. And so when I'm telling you, Matt Painter is as good an X and O person as there is in the country. And I know that some people want to point to some of those tournament losses and question that. But if you look at the long arc, you're going to be hard pressed. And so when he's delegating things to Sasha or PJ, like he's delegating things, he's not a dummy in those things.
Yeah.
But he is. So it requires some level of humility and some desire, I think, to develop your staff. And then you as a leader, you get to say, oh, wait, if I'm not doing that every day, what does this allow me to focus on as well? So there's a really interesting dynamic that goes on there. But if I were as talented in X and O's as Matt Painter is,
Yeah.
I would have a hard time letting go of some of those things. So now, of course, PJ and others, they're pretty aware of that too. So like, okay, I better step up. I better really know my stuff if this guy who knows so much is entrusting it to me.
Yeah, Matt, talked about it on Thursday's press conference, and he used the exact same phrase that I had to check my ego at the door a little bit and realize that. But I think it's
I
really been
didn't
an
see it,
dynamic.
so that's not a plant. I did not see that press conference. So.
No,
Yeah.
you're right, but it was really so much of that that I think it's interesting. His humility seems to really come out at important times, and you have to think that his teammates or his players get that in spades. All right, one other leadership question I have in a specific, and I'll let you interject. Zach Edey, interesting character, because we talked with Chad Q. Brown last week about his personality profile, very steady, very even. You see that on the basketball court, but when you look at a guy that you don't typically have leaders at 7'4" in basketball, it's usually that point guard or whatever that is. But talk about what you see from Zach and how he handles himself and how he leads this basketball team, because I think he really does.
Well, I think about the word, John Maxwell, great leadership author, he sums all of leadership up into one word. He calls it influence. And ultimately, when you have a player as talented and successful as Zach Edey, whether Zach wants to be an influence or not, he's going to be. Way back in our version of that back in the day for us was Woody Austin. Woody Austin couldn't help but be an influence because he was so talented and such a key part of what's going on. The reality, so Zach's going to have influence whether he wants it or not. Now add in his steady demeanor. And that is something that is stabilizing. And again, I think you see this when I say steady, I'm not talking about dispassionate. There's plenty of passion, but you don't you don't do the whole amygdala hijack thing where you let your brain go haywire and you're not in charge of it anymore. You have passion, but you are measured. And I think that's stabilizing for everybody around any endeavor, be it athletic or otherwise. So it's really admirable. And on top of that, I mean, just listen to Zach talk about his teammates and the team and the program. I mean, for Pete's sake, barring some catastrophe, he's going to be a 2-time National Player of the Year. And you don't hear Zach Edey walking around just talking about how great he is all the time, and yet he is. So when your top player is behaving that way and influencing that way, again, back to the culture thing, that's what an incredible asset.
Yeah. Tongue in cheek here, but he also, as his leadership skills, he'll lead by example and work on those free throws because he's been so good. And he's going through a patch. Maybe Tim Spiker could come and give him some lessons of the 16 steps of shooting. But no, Zach doesn't. Zach is really a very good free throw shooter. He's just going through a rough patch. And it'll be interesting to see how. But one thing about him, and there is, I guess I want to ask you about the correlation between hard work and leadership. There is something to it. He leads also by the fact that darn well he and Trey Kaufman-Renn will be spending extra time shooting free throws until they can't shoot anymore. That's been the MO.
Well, I mean, if you just think about any job that any of us have had, if we look at the leader who's coming in late and leaving early and taking extra vacation, and then they show up with some kind of rah-rah speech someday, we're all going to go like, yeah, whatever. Like, I'm listening to you. You're using your position for perks. You're not leveraging this to make this all better for all of us. And so, of course, when it comes to hard work, and and at Purdue, all you got to do is look at the back of the practice shorts. Like, this is not, it's not confusing what we're about when it comes to that. It's painted on, over top where we run out onto the court. It's a requirement. And it's absolutely true that if a leader's not going to, they can't just talk about it. They have to also show up and be an example. And no doubt that is critically important.
All right. You came as a walk-on. One other person I want to talk is football related. And it also is an unbelievable situation. Aiden O'Connell goes from walk-on bided his time as a seventh string quarterback and tight end in practice to now being. I think he's going to have no doubt he's going to have an NFL career. He's shown that whether he's going to be a starter for the next 10 years, who knows? But he has shown that. Just talk about that mindset of a guy that, like you wanted to get on the court. Aiden O'Connell wanted to play and probably had to listen to people say it's never going to work for you. But that mentality of, that stick-to-itiveness and that thing in your fiber that gets that done.
Well, for me, I think it was a journey of faith of sorts. I believed that God had a path for me. Now, I didn't know that it was going to. I remember a very late night, long negotiation. God, if you can just make this, if I can just make this team, I've got all this plans for you. Of course, he's laughing at me, but he's like, it's all right, Tim.
Man plans, God laughs, right?
That's right. That's right. But it really was just taking a step in faith. For me, it was, are you going to go play Division III, or do you want to try to give this a shot with no guarantees? But, as it turned out, it really was probably kind of a development of my own character in a sense, to just show up the next day, keep believing, show up the next day, keep believing. And, I remember the day that I realized that it actually made the team. And I was talking with my mom, many other people around the program, our managers and such, said, hey, I came from Brewster, so I did have an opportunity. I came during the summer. We played pickup. So they got a sense for whether or not this was even possible. And then when I came back in the fall, I was with the team the whole time the whole kind of the 1 day walk on tryout, that wasn't my story. And frankly, if it had been, I probably wouldn't have made the team because my game doesn't stand out in that way. Yeah. But we go through the fall, things are going well, and we're starting practice. And I think it was my mom asked me, or actually a couple different people, and I was like, when are you going to say I've made the team? And I said to myself, I will say I've made the team when my name's on a locker. So we're coming up, we're a week into practice. I didn't have practice gear. The day before practice, I was like, Coach, do you want me to, what do you want me to do for practice gear? I just didn't want to make any assumptions, right? I wasn't, and he said, yeah, go down to the cage, and Mark Clark took care of me. It was about a week later, I came in, I sat my books down. I had been getting dressed at an empty locker, just didn't have a name on it at all.
Yeah.
And I was just taking off my shoes, and I look up, and it said Tim Spiker, number 4. And I was like, nobody else was in the locker room. And I was like, I almost start crying thinking about it now. I mean, it was a really, really special moment that I felt so blessed to be a part of.
Yeah, no doubt. In the story, the rest is history, so to speak. Number 4, let's see, there's been Kyle Macy, there's been Rob Hummel, there's been Tim Spiker.
Yeah, I'm sure Tim Spiker comes to mind for many people.
We like to throw trivia into all this stuff, but the great Rob Hummel is
enjoying the great announcer now. Robbie Hummel is phenomenal, absolutely.
And like you, he's also about as good a person as you're going to find, and that in the grand scheme is kind of what this is all about: is having good people around you, and we're privileged to spend a little bit of time with you. Okay, the book, and he's not selling his book, but I just liked his book so much. The only leaders worth following, by Tim Spiker, written in 2020, and we'll get you a link. Tim, send me a link, and we'll get it on our message boards as well, where people can pick it up. And Tim is not guaranteeing a national championship for the Boilermakers, but I think that would make your April 8th pretty special. If
it certainly would. It certainly would. I mean, we've all jumped at that. Anybody who has a connection, certainly you don't have to be on the team to care about that. The whole community is leaning in, and to me, when I watch what's going on with this team, frankly, when you compare what did happen, not only against FDU, but in the last portion of the season, you see changes. You see things are different. And Matt said it after the season last year. I'd be stupid not to reconsider some things. And this is something else about Matt that I want to point out that's pretty rare in this day and age, but somebody who's willing to take responsibility. If we go back, I want to say 8 or 9 years ago, when we had some really rough times and we were at the bottom of the Big Ten, and Matt didn't. I mean, it's just rare that people want to say, hey, it's my responsibility, and really mean it. I know people do that kind of as a fake thing. But Matt said, look, we've got guys that don't know how to play hard, and it's up to me to make sure they learn how to do that. And if they can't learn that, then it's up to me to get the right guys in the program. So no matter how you want to do the math, it's on me. And you just don't, I mean, you got to think about what Matt has at stake to say that publicly. Maybe he's just saying the thing that's obvious, but many people don't say that. They don't take that responsibility. Yeah. Thankfully, Purdue is a place that wasn't moving as quickly, too quickly, I would say, as most athletic programs do. And now, as he made a shift through that experience, he made changes. Now we have the program that we have today that is doing amazing things. So I just love watching, noticing some of the changes. You see, I saw somebody posted on I guess I'm supposed to say X now. I was going to say Twitter, but somebody posted like the difference between at this point this season and last season is joy. And you see that. I don't know if we can credit that you know, particularly to Lance, perhaps he's a lot of fun.
Oh, I think a lot of it.
Yeah, but there is, you know, nobody learned how to shoot a three this year. So if you want to go down the line and kind of whether it's Lance or Fletcher, Mason Gillis obviously is just lethal at this point and it's not like Braden Smith's not going to hit one either. They're better, yes, but the bigger part is not that somebody shot a bunch. I'm glad they shoot their thousands of threes during the summer. Absolutely. But there is a different kind of freedom that's going on right now that is different than last year. And if the ball doesn't go through Zach at times, we're still playing basketball. And I think that is the biggest difference between last year and this year. So it's just it's such an easy, I know I'm totally biased, but I think, I think it's such an easy team to cheer for when you look at the whole of what's going on.
No doubt. And they're doing that in spades and Mackey Arena every time. Only three more home games. Yeah. And it will be a bittersweet day. You got one more point? Go ahead, fire away.
Yeah, I got to say something about the IU game. I mean, so I have a buddy of mine, Steve Swain. He works for the Big Ten Network, and he and I are conversing a lot. He knows a lot about basketball. And one of the things that he shared with me that I wouldn't have been able to say it on my own, but he said it and that was it. But he just talked about, I never wanted that game to end. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, that's exactly how I felt. We were in such control. There was I'll have to confess here. Maybe it's because I'm the guy that only got in when we were up by a bunch, but I wanted to win by 30. Like we're up by 28. Yeah. Like I would have, you know, and then Gunn hits a couple threes and dials it back a little bit, but we were in such control of that game. I have never, that I can recall in my life, and I'm 51 at this point, I don't ever remember watching an IU game just totally relaxed. Like this is just fun. This is just fun. And then, you know, I'm glad that Zach Edey finally had an experience of what it is like to be Tommy Luce. Like I'm glad that like Zach finally figured out when you're holding the ball beyond the 3-point line and everybody in the arena wants you to shoot it, and he does. And, you know, I'd like to see the decibel levels between Tommy's 2 threes against Iowa years ago and Zach's the other night. That was such an awesome moment. And I think everybody understands that they're a part of it. They're watching it, but they're also a part of it. And it's just, I've never had an experience watching an IU game like I did in that one. And it was just, Steve Swain, my buddy, he said it right. I did not want it to end. I just wanted them to keep playing. So that was awfully fun last week, and then we'll keep going.
All right, that is the secret sauce of Mackey Arena in Purdue basketball right now, and that is that amazing show that Purdue continues to put on it, not at home and away. So we'll look forward to watching the Boilermakers Sunday against Ohio State, which will be a challenge of sorts, and as well. But we appreciate that. Tim, thanks so much. Always enlightening. We're grateful for your time today. You were a busy man, and we appreciate you making time for us. We want to thank Trent Johnson was just here. I think he just left. We're still down. We're actually recording it at the Big O Sports Room, where tomorrow there will be some Tim Spiker memorabilia for sale, certainly. But there'll be about everything you could ever want to get from 10 to 4 tomorrow. Make sure if you're interested in stuff to show down there. It's literally a museum here. It's really awesome and a great spot. Thanks, State Farm agent Trent Johnson. We also thank Triple X on the Hill, but on the level of Purdue tradition since 1929. I want to thank Gordon and Mary and the good folks at WLFI for making this happen. We'll be back next week. Tim Spiker is a great guest. Orlando Whiten's a great guest. But next week, we got two Purdue All-Americans, two of the greatest players to ever play at Purdue. We'll have Rick Mount and Dave Shellhouse in separate segments. At least that's the plan. Things can change. You never know. But we'll look forward to that. And we'll be talking Purdue basketball after the Boilermakers take on Rutgers Thursday. And then they'll go to Michigan the following Sunday. It never ends in the Big Ten. A lot of fun to watch. So have a great week, everybody. Thanks for watching and listening. And we will look forward to more on Golden Black Live.